So we're getting lean bank 1 and lean bank 2 error codes from the check engine light consistently, those two. And the engine doesn't feel like it has the power that it should. It feels a little weird on acceleration. Even after I've eliminated every other possible cause, now we're going to go into the intake manifold and have a look. Because as it turns out, there was a service bulletin on these cars put out after, I think in 2003, after the first generation had been out there for at least a year, on some kind of issue with the vacuum chamber inside this intake manifold. The T25 torque bit is what we're using to remove this manifold, and the key to using this tool is to make sure it is completely inserted into the socket before you apply torque. Very important. I got it. Okay, so bolts on the outside are the longer ones. The bolts on the inside are the smaller ones. So after we have all the bolts out, including the one here, then we just take a flat blade screwdriver and very carefully under the throttle body and off it comes. And we can see down into the manifold. Manifold right here, this large plastic manifold, is the vacuum chamber. There's a relief valve right here, and there are 6 bolts that hold the vacuum chamber down. I'm sorry, there's 8 bolts. 8 bolts that hold the vacuum chamber in position. 2000 Saturn VUE with the 3-liter V6, and I'm getting the P0174 Bank 2 and P0171 Bank 1 lean mixture error codes. So the first thing we want to do is remove the top part of the manifold. And then once we have that manifold open up, then we take paper towels and we plug the intake ports to the engine because we don't want anything to fall down in there. Now the factory generated a technical service bulletin for this problem with these error codes related to the torque on this vacuum chamber that is inside the manifold. The vacuum chamber is there so that the engine always has a source of vacuum to operate various vacuum controlled accessories. The first thing that I noticed on the vacuum chamber of my car was that this bolt right here was loose to the point where this entire vacuum chamber can actually flex and cause a vacuum leak, which is exactly why the factory issued a TSB on it, stating that the bolts, all 8 of the bolts, should be removed, coated with the Loctite 242, which is, this is the equivalent I got, the equivalent to Loctite 242. And put back in, and then retorqued in this sequence right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Torqued in that sequence. Because it's critical that the vacuum chamber maintains a vacuum at all times. Now, while we're on that subject, let me tell you that the first time I opened it up and I was cleaning the grease off this valve and moving it with my finger, I could hear the vacuum going in it, which means it had held vacuum inside the chamber for over 24 hours, because that is how long it has been since the engine had been shut off. So what that tells me is the vacuum chamber does not have a crack in it, and the connection with the gasket is good. So because of that, I'm going to be very careful and remove only one bolt at a time. Remove one bolt at a time and coat it with Loctite and put it back in, but I won't torque it down yet. I'll wait till they're all in and they're within a half turn of being torqued, but not torqued all the way. So they're backed off a half a turn is what I'm saying. And then once they're all in with Loctite and backed off a half a turn, then I will torque them according to this torque chart here. Vacuum chamber torque sequence, very important. So we want to carefully insert these 6 fasteners, starting with this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, then that one. That's the pattern. Put them in, but don't torque them. Just leave them loose, at least a couple turns loose. There you go. Now put in these screws. Add the Loctite to the threads before you put them in. Okay, all the bolts are in. All the bolts have Loctite equivalent 242 added to the threads. Starting with this one. Bring it in. Back it off a half turn. Now this one, same thing. Bring it all the way in. Back it off a half turn. Same thing with the other 6 bolts in the center. All 6 bolts in the center are brought all the way in and then backed off a half turn. It's important that you back every bolt off a half a turn before you go to the next step. All the bolts are in, but they're all backed off a half turn. None of the bolts are under torque.